All right, so last week we were talking about the foundation of Christian ethics from a biblical perspective, and I mentioned that doing the good is never ever to be divorced from the ultimate good, which is God. In other words, we can't just say that we are moral, ethical people and then say, well, I don't believe in God, because then that is in itself is immoral. All of the morals, all the ethics that we have came from God. And so in a very practical sense, a person that's an atheist cannot say that he is, well, at least not a Christian ethical person. He can't have any type of biblical morality because he doesn't believe in God. Mm-hmm. So his morality has got to come from other sources, and then you have to ask him, well, what makes you believe that that is right and this other thing is wrong? Where did that come from? And then you'll have him in a quagmire, because he has to explain, well, where do I get the source of this morality from if it's not God? Mm-hmm. Is it from my parents? Then where did they get it from? If it's from the society, then where did it come from? Did it evolve? Then if it evolved, why did it evolve this way? Why is it wrong to go ahead and rob a bank? Why can't I do that if I want to? All right, so all morality comes from God. Whether men admit it or not, that is the source of all that is good. We also talked about how a Christian moral code cannot be divorced from the scriptures. Otherwise, it has no authority. The authority of the Christian is in the scriptures. Just like Jesus, when he fought against the devil, he didn't say, well, let me go and check the Talmud, or let me check the writings of the rabbi. Let me see what Caiaphas wrote or what Annas. He went straight to the Word of God, the law of Moses and the prophets. That was his authority. And so when you have divine authority, there's no need to go and seek any other source of authority. Principle ethics is concerned with the guidance for carrying out the good and the right. When we say a man is a man of principles, what we're saying is that he has a moral code, and he is concerned with the guidance for carrying out that which is good and that which is right, as opposed to somebody who is unprincipled. If we say a man is unprincipled, then we're saying that he does not have guidance, and you don't want to be closely associated with unprincipled people, especially if it's some kind of business deal or some kind of ministry, and you know this person is unprincipled. I mean, they're dishonest, you know, they don't have good character, then that's not a person you want to associate yourself with. So that's called principle ethics, concerned with the guidance for carrying out the good and the right. Then we talked about consequentialism, which believes that the ultimate standard for judging right from wrong is ends or results, and that is on page 28. Did you already get your book?
Yeah, I had it last time.
All right, so go ahead and read page 28 there, where it talks about consequentialism.
Consequentialist ethics.
Yes.
Consequentialists believe that the ultimate criterion or standard of right and wrong is end or results. Mm-hmm. Committing adultery, for example, is not inherently wrong in it of itself. But though our lives together as human beings, the consequences that arise from the adultery may render it morally suspect. Mm-hmm. One tells the truth as a consequentialist, nor because truth-telling it is itself a moral obligation, but because in most situations truth-telling products the best result. Consequences are the foundation of ethics. Okay. Of course, appealing to consequences as a grounding for ethics immediately raises the question, which is consequences, or what type of results? Generally, consequentialists have contended that the results calculated are not moral principles or virtues, but non-moral results. Since all human beings by nature seem to pursue happiness or pleasure in life, happiness is the prime candidate for the non-normal consequences utilized in the evaluation process. But of course, that raises another question. Happiness for whom? And it is here that we can divide the consequentialist approach into several schools of thought, most notably ethical egoism and what is that?
Utilitarianism. All right, we'll get into that later on. But what this is saying is that consequentialism is concerned with the consequences of one's actions. So if a person does not believe that committing adultery is wrong, he may do that. But the consequences of doing that is going to be with him or her for the rest of his or her life. All right? And so when we are consequentialists, when consequences are part of our ethical structure, we're always thinking about what will this produce down the road? What will it cause if I were to act in a certain way?
Pastor, could I ask a question?
Yes,
So,
this is what it's for.
but by the same token, okay, they do not believe that it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But would it be safe to say, I know it's right, but I'm going to do it anyway?
Well, you have people who do that, and that is called presumptuous sinning.
Okay.
A presumptuous sin is one in which the person acts against his better judgment.
Okay.
And he does it anyway. And the consequentialist is saying, if I do this, I'm going to have to suffer the consequences of doing it. And of course, the biblical ethic is it is wrong because God says so.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you have different levels. If God is your ultimate authority, then of course you will not commit adultery. But if it's man's law, well, there's no law that nobody's going to arrest you for committing adultery. Mm-hmm. So you can do that under man's law. But what are the consequences? Broken homes, broken lives, broken hearts, children out of wedlock, divorce, all these things are consequences of that. Mm-hmm. All right, now, McIntyre blamed the mess we're in on modern liberalism. All right, modern liberalism has to do, it's a philosophy that relegates norms and ethics to the individual. And the individual sets his own standards.
Sets his own standards to fit him or her, right?
Right. All right, that's what liberalism has done to our society. What it has done, it has removed the fear of God from the society, which the Bible says is the beginning of knowledge, and has placed it on the individual person. Well, what happened is that the individual person has a sin nature. But if you don't take that into consideration, then you think, well, this person can't handle it. But that's why they give kids in middle school condoms. Right? It's an individual choice. Tell it. But a kid, 14, 15, 16 years old, as you well know, his hormones are raging. Mm-hmm. All right? They're just coming into adolescence, and then they becoming little adults, and they have this strong desire to experiment anyway. And when you tell them it's your choice, 9 times out of 10, what is that kid going to do? Mm-hmm. He said, you get a girlfriend, going to go up to some back room, and they're going to have some kind of sexual relations, all right? They're going to experiment. Mm-hmm. And so that's where liberalism has offended society, because it places the norms and ethics on the individual, and the autonomous self takes over. All right, self on the throne. That's what it does. You have your own desires ruling you. Therefore, we have a society with liberal morality, which is permissiveness, permissive morality. We have a very permissive society. All right, so what are people going to do? They're going to follow their natural proclivities. We are human beings. We're sinners by nature, right? And until we are graced by God's Spirit, and we are strengthened by His might, by His Spirit in the inner man, we're going to do whatever we want to do, whatever we like to do. All right? That is the nature of human beings. All right? It is the reason why David went ahead and took Uriah's wife. Uriah was one of his generals in his army, and he saw this beautiful woman, and her husband was not home. As a matter of fact, her husband was out fighting his wars, and he took this woman and he lay with her. All right? He was on the throne. The other times that he was God's man and he did those wonderful things, he killed Goliath and defeated all the enemies, God was on the throne of his heart. But that one instance when he placed David on the throne of his heart, David then did the unthinkable and he committed that awful sin, which, by the way, there were consequences for it. For the rest of his life, he had to pay for that. First, the child that was conceived died in childbirth, and then, he was exposed as a liar. The prophet Nathan confronted him and gave him the story about one man had all these ewe lambs and another man had one little ewe lamb, and the man that had all the multiple of lambs took the one man's ewe lamb, and he used that parable in front of him, and David said, who did that? That was a wicked man to take that man one's ewe lamb, and he had all these other lambs. That man shall die for his transgression. And Nathan the prophet said, thou art the man, it's you. You have all these wives, and you went and took another man's wife. You only had one wife, and made her your wife, and then had the man killed. So you're the one that deserved to die, O king. And that produced conviction in David, and David repented. All right, David repented because he realized that he was wrong. Well, the consequences were the man had to be killed. He lied about it. The child died in childbirth, and then he had all of these little flames in his kingdom. He had one of his sons rose up against him. Another son raped one of his daughters. He had rebellion within the kingdom. He had to flee from Absalom. All these things were consequences of that one action. So his life was never the same again. So you see, when you put self on the throne, you set your own standards and you do whatever you want to do. And it's a permissive society. Most of your commercials on television are geared towards a permissive society. They know that people like to live extravagantly, so they advertise these extravagant cars, and they advertise these luxurious vacation places, and they advertise even the perfumes. I was looking at this one perfume, and I could not believe that this one little 4-ounce bottle of perfume was selling for $100. And somebody's going to buy that thing, all right, because people are going to indulge in whatever is presented to them as being the latest new thing. Go ahead.
That's what I'm going to say. You know, not only that, the subliminal messages that it sends.
Subliminal. It's good.
There's a young man who was watching a particular cartoon, and I told the young man, "Can you pause for a minute? I want to ask you a question. Do you know what you're watching?" He says, "I'm watching cartoons." I says, "What is the topic or what is the subject?" "Oh, we're talking about this, this, and that." I says, "Can I let you know something? While you're hearing that, although it sounds funny in cartoon, there's a subliminal message." And I basically informed him, this is what it is. Now, you can do one of two things. You can let me help you with this, or I'm going to have to tell your mom that what you're watching, because she doesn't know. She's at work. So, anyways, it turned out where he understood, and when I got out the shower, this particular young man turned it off and started reading a book or something. Okay. So he was submissive after a while. I said, just think about it, keep watching it, just listen to the message. What are they talking about? They're talking about sex, and they're talking about, hey, give me some weed. This is a cartoon. A cartoon. A cartoon. The Simpsons. And I was like, do you hear that? And then, now I told them the reason why it's subliminal is they'll talk normal for a while. Hi, what's for dinner? Blah, blah, blah. And then they'll try to sneak it in. I said, that's what's subliminal, where they catch you, and you're like, well, if it's in a cartoon, it must be okay.
Right. Exactly. It's like a sandwich. Right? You have the bun on the outside, and then you have the bun at the bottom. It's all the stuff they put in between that you are not aware of. That's the sandwich, and that's exactly what they do. And so that's liberal theology, but a liberal morality. And then the liberal theology side of it is that it allows for the morphing of the Christian faith. Liberal theology allows for the morphing of the Christian faith. What does that mean? That means that liberal theology allows the preacher, allows the Bible professor, allows the theologian to change Christianity to suit the desires of the culture. So I was telling the brother in the other class that we taught last night, I said, if Paul the Apostle, Peter, John were to come back today to pastor a church, most churches in the world today, especially in America, would not allow them to preach. Or if they did preach, they wouldn't allow them to come back a second time, because what they will preach on is not even close to what's happening in most churches. Because they actually knew the Lord, they walked with Him, they understood what He was trying to do. And many of the churches today, the preachers today, the theologians of today, are not on the same